Hello, this is Aaron Saft on the MR Runningpains podcast. With 30 years of running experience and 20 years of coaching, I thought it time to share with you things I've learned and people I've met so that you can try things for yourself and see if they help your running. Thanks for joining me.
Wrote this song while crewing Aaron on a 100-mile foot race through the trails in the rain and mud. How about that? Miles to go. 100 miles to go. Don't ask me why I do it, I don't know. Miles by foot. 100 miles by foot. Don't ask me why I do it, I can't stay put. Rain is a coming, can't give a fit. Rain is a coming, can't give a fit. Don't ask me why I do it, but I am legit.
Welcome back to episode 40 of the MR Runningpains podcast. Phew, 40 episodes. My goodness, time's going by. But more importantly, my guest today, the first is Lisa Landrum. Lisa is an athlete that I coach. I started coaching her about 4 months ago, and she came to me with the goal of completing her first 100-miler, which she recently did at the Rim to River 100-mile race in West Virginia. A number of my athletes competed there, and really all of them had positive things to say about the race, as you'll hear from Lisa. And then I am joined by Lisa's crew captain and pacer, Nathan Leehman. Nathan is a experienced and veteran ultra runner in his own right, having completed the Tour de France, as we talk about a little bit in this episode. I think Nathan would be a great future guest to kind of share a lot of his knowledge. Nathan is also the owner of the ultra running company in Charlotte, North Carolina. He brings a lot to the running community, as well as to this podcast. I really appreciate his insights and his words of wisdom that you'll hear in this podcast, as well as Lisa's. Lisa shares a lot. I appreciate her openness, as do all my guests, their openness to share and willing to go deeper into how things went. We talk about training and we talk about race day preparations, all of that stuff. As we did in my previous episode with the Yeti 100. That was such a great time talking to Julia Jordan and her experience at the Yeti 100. But we'll learn some new things today. Lisa and Nathan. So I hope you enjoy this episode. And as always, I'll join you after the interview, and we'll catch up on what's going on. So sit back, relax, or enjoy your run. And I present to you Lisa Landrum and Nathan Leehman. All right. I'm here with Lisa Landrum and Nathan Leehman, and we're going to be discussing Lisa's experience at the Rim to River. So, Lisa, why don't you start with introducing yourself?
Hi, I'm Lisa Landrum, living in Charlotte, North Carolina, and this was my first 100, so I'm excited to be on here to talk about it. Aaron helped a little bit with the preparation. We'll get into that, but that's how I know Aaron, and Nathan and I are running around in the same circles. So he has a story.
What was your experience prior to the 100, Lisa? What was your longest distance?
My longest distance was a 50-miler. I've done 2 50-milers.
Right. One in training and one racing, right?
Yes.
Excellent. And Nathan, your turn.
Hey, Aaron, thanks for having us on. I really appreciate it. My name is Nathan Leehman. I'm the owner of the Ultra Running Company in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've been running for the better part of the last decade and primarily run 100-mile races. Usually get a few of those in each year. And I have raced across the United States and been to Europe to race once. So I've got both local and international experience, and really everything from the East Coast here in North Carolina, Charlotte's my hometown, out to California and everything in between in the States.
Nathan's being quite modest about what he did over in Europe. You can actually say what you did.
So my European race was called Tour de Géants. It's a 219-mile race around the Aosta Valley of Italy, which means that it takes place entirely in the Alps. So you get quite a bit of vertical going up and down mountains and going through small Italian towns. It's a really, really wonderful race.
Awesome. Thank you. Lisa, what race did you do? What are we talking about here? What was the course like? Get into all those details.
So this is the Rim to River 100, and this year was the inaugural year for a 100-miler race in West Virginia. And, the race director was really communicative and gave a lot of background about this race, which was cool. Obviously, everybody involved took a lot of pride in, the area. And the reason that I kind of looked into it, a 100-miler has been on my bucket list for a while. And 2020, as we know, just really kind of threw everybody for a loop. And I'm like, man, if there is ever a time that I, have the time to do it and need to kind of go someplace else in my head for a while, it's now. Like, this will give me something else to think about and a goal. Hopefully for the end of it, nobody knew how long this mess would last, but that's the reason that I signed up for it. And the course just looked absolutely beautiful, and it was cool.
Awesome. What are we talking about for kind of elevation change?
So it was, I think it was listed as 16,000. I don't know if it was actually that much. My Garmin died, which is a rookie mistake, but it was definitely, the parts that were runnable were really, really runnable, and the parts that were not were really not. So it was super evident, when to run and when to hike. Some of the sections, there were 2 sections that I remember I used my hands and feet. So there were definitely some places that it was pretty steep. You're climbing in. You're climbing in and out of the New River Gorge. So we started at the top and then went down, descended to the New River, climbed back up, and then did that all through the race. So
it was rim to river infinity. Rim to river, yeah. Rim to river, rim to river.
That's exactly right.
Awesome. Nathan, what role did you provide Lisa in this?
So Lisa came to me probably 2 months ago now to see if I would help her in crewing and pacing. And this will be the first year in probably the last decade that I haven't run a 100-mile race. And I didn't have anything scheduled towards the beginning of the year. I know you're familiar with UTMB, and I was signed up for that. But I'm pretty cautious on the COVID front, and so I've chosen not to do any races myself for the rest of the year, just to see how this plays out. And so when Lisa approached me, one, I really wanted to help her out and see her finish a 100-mile race, but also it gave me an opportunity to see what people are doing in response to COVID, how they're changing their methods, and what some of the best practices are, so that we can give out the advice when people come into the store and say, "Hey, should I be doing this?" And so it's, from my perspective, really nice to be able to see some of the changes that people are making at aid stations, some of the changes in starts that Lisa will talk about, and some of the challenges that presents as well. So for me, this was just a wonderful opportunity to take a year in which I'm not racing and both give something back, but also get something out of it and find out what's happening now. And just a plug for the Rim to River course itself. I couldn't have been happier when Lisa mentioned this race. It was one of the few races that early on in COVID closure said, we're going to have this, and got approvals for it. And I think it's you hear questions a lot about what makes a great first 100-miler, and usually people think that's a flat race. And my experience is that that's not the case at all. A flat race is as difficult as a mountain race in some cases. And Rim to River was just a really nice mix of that. I think we got about in the last 18 miles, I'm guessing it was only about 2,000 feet of gain. But it was, you knew when to walk, you knew when to run, you knew what was coming. And as you're doing a first 100-miler, that's so valuable to know, to be able to plan out the race and have expectations, both as a runner and as a pacer. So I just thought this was a great experience, and it really did lay out well for that first time runner. I think there were a lot of first time runners at Rim to River, and depending on their strategy, they finished in different ways. But it was really nice to be able to see how Lisa attacked each portion of that, and how we as pacers could help her do that, because it did lay out really well. Very runnable in places. The climbs were there, but they were very noticeable. So you could expect them. What was your first 100-miler, Nathan? My first 100-miler was Cactus Rose in Texas. It's on the same trails as the Bandera 100K, and it's a fantastic race put on by Tejas Trails, and great folks down in Texas. So I did a couple races down there when I first started, just because the community was so amazing. But same sort of thing, not incredibly technical, but technical enough. I think Cactus Rose has about 16,000 feet of climbing over 100 miles, and that's enough to get you a workout, but not enough that it's going to crush a first-time runner. Yeah, that's great. So Lisa, how did you pick your crew and your pacers?
Never having done one of these before, I knew that I needed and wanted someone with a ton of experience, and who, knew what to do, wouldn't be afraid to tell people what to do. And for better or worse, Nathan popped into my head kind of right away. And it took me a while to ask him, honestly, because although, he and I are friends and I've known him for a while, we've never actually even run together. And, he has all those accolades, and I'm like, he is not going to want to come and do this for me for, no reason. I mean, take a weekend and drive up there and stay and do that. And I did ask him, and he said yes, and I was thrilled. And my other pacer, Holly, really has just been kind of with me throughout the training process. She's done she did most of the long runs with me. And I knew that she knew me as a runner. So I thought that was super important to have. And then Jason, my husband, helped obviously as well. So, at the beginning I had one more person, a couple more people that I wanted to be involved. And then Nathan was like, man, it kind of, the crew access points were really limited because of COVID. So there really wasn't a need to have a ton of people out there. I, as a novice kind of thought maybe the more the better, taking care of me, telling me what to do. But it ended up being perfect, I think, from a crew perspective.
Sure. Yeah. So you've limited it to Nathan, your husband, and Holly, correct?
Yeah.
And Nathan, you were going to provide both roles as crew and pacer, right?
That's correct. Yeah, I was really excited to be able to run as well. Originally, we just talked about me managing kind of the crew out there, but the opportunity to run and see how she was reacting at the end and maybe give a little bit of tough love, and just based on experience was wonderful for me. I do think that again, people think they need a village out there, and you do need so much support when you're training for a 100-miler and completing it. But most of that's really in the barn. If you have 2 or 3 people that can manage well the process, it makes all the difference in the world. So frankly, I didn't know Holly or Jason well, but they just fit the role so well. Holly was incredibly open to suggestions about how to pace. She knew Lisa very, very well. We talked about different strategies going forward. And then Jason was just ready to have everything there. And obviously he knows Lisa better than anyone. And so the nuances of what she needed that I might not have seen or that Holly might not have seen, he was right there for it. And he also, frankly, took directions really well. He was just so excited to do it. He'd have things laid out. He'd say, okay, here are 3 options for her at every aid station. And it made my tasks and my planning so much easier to have that there.
Cool. Lisa, did your kids come?
Yeah, they did. I was going to include them in the crew, but they didn't really. I mean, it was helpful from an emotional, mental point of view to see them. I think I saw them twice out of the 4, 2 or 3 times. I can't remember, but Jason was good at managing when kind of, they might be helpful for me to see and when they might not be so helpful for me to see. So, and we had talked about that before, which was key as well. I think a lot of people want their whole family around them and everyone to see them doing this. And I don't think it would have been good for them to see me at some of those stops. So it worked out.
How old are they?
17. I have a 17-year-old daughter, a 14-year-old son, and an 11-year-old daughter.
Right on. So they're a little bit older. You don't have to worry about them as much. It gets a little bit tougher when they're younger in age. You start worrying about them a little bit more than yourself. So, yeah, that's good. Lisa, how did you prep your crew? Like, what did you give them ahead of time or tell them ahead of time?
We had a couple of meetings when it got really, really close, and I was 100% convinced that this whole thing was going to go down. I had a big old spreadsheet that had notes from me or about what I thought I might need. And, when I would see them, and we just shared that information and just kind of would have discussions about that, not at a big meeting, but just kind of like throwing it around. Like I'd ask Nathan a couple of things and then go and update the sheet. And that was very helpful for me. I felt like all of us were on the same page. And the night before, we sat down, a couple of things came up that, I hadn't thought of before. So that was good to have Nathan there. So yeah, that's the way we did it.
Cool. So Nathan, you looked over everything and what did you see that you were like, well, maybe we should think about this?
Well, I actually really like the idea of having a couple of different goals for your race. And Lisa had that coming in. So the first time we met, she said, listen, I have goals. And Lisa, I don't know if I can throw them out there, but she was pretty clear what the goals were. And and so we built a spreadsheet that basically tracked all 3 of those goals. So we'd know where she was in relationship to her goals every time she came in. And that was helpful for both for us as crew, but also to plan out all her nutrition, to plan out when she'd get the water, to plan out what she needed in her only drop bag, how we'd stock. And our goal became, let's make this as easy on her as possible at the aid stations and eliminate as many potential errors as possible. So when she'd come in, we'd literally just empty out her bag, whether she'd eaten her nutrition or not, and then throw in what we knew she'd need for the next session based on her pace and movement, so that all she had to worry about, hopefully, was running, not that she'd be missing something in her bag or that there was something that she'd forgotten. So we did adjust a little bit on the fly at each aid station, but we had a plan in place for drinking, for hydration, for nutrition, and even for small things like changes of socks, but they were all planned out ahead of time. And that made it very, very easy, both because she'd know what to expect when she got to the aid station, if she could remember at that point what we'd planned. And then we knew what she'd hoped for, and it gave us the opportunity when we did have to adjust that we were only adjusting small things. We weren't going in and being the crew that basically says, okay, what do you want now? And having the runner have to make a decision. That doesn't make it easy for the athlete when they're trying to complete 100 miles.
Absolutely. I rather enjoyed, Lisa and I obviously had a few conversations prior to the actual event, and she was starting to describe her goals, and she had spoken to you, and you called her out on one of her goals. Lisa, do you want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah. So we had three goals, or I had three goals. A was like, if everything was just in line, everything was perfect, the weather was perfect, I was feeling great and could run the whole 100 miles. And then a B goal, when I first showed Nathan, he was like, yeah, that's sandbagging. Like, don't do that one. What would it really be? And so we adjusted a couple hours. And then the final goal was like, just right at the cutoff at 32 hours and walking, physically being able to walk or run across it. That's like kind of the last tier. And I ended up, I didn't meet my A goal, but I did meet my B goal. Although, and this is a part we'll get to later, there's a story about how I met that, how I crushed that B goal.
Fantastic.
I think it's really important, Aaron, to have those different goals, because when you're running, and we will definitely touch on this later, when as the runner you miss a goal, things feel like they're going to fall apart. And if you don't have a backup there, then you don't have something to strive for, and it's easy to just see the darkness in it. If you have a couple goals that are true goals, not a sandbag goal, not something that you'd be okay with, but something that you truly want, you can always readjust and shoot for those. And I think that made a big difference. I can think of twice in the race where the goals and Lisa's ability to hit those goals made a huge difference in how she was running. So, and they need to be honest goals. If they're not real goals and you don't believe in them when you start, you're certainly not going to believe in them when you feel terrible at mile 80.
I totally agree. Yes. We were just talking last night. I do a Facebook Live session with the athletes each week, and we were talking about goal races and then making goals for each race. So I agree that you should come up with an A, B, and C, and even just a fallback, just like get to the finish. So that's
always there.
That's right. Just get to the finish. Lisa, based on what we just talked about, your goals and such, what mental mindset were you in prior to starting the race? Where did you feel like, how were you feeling? Were you obviously nervous, right? This is a new distance, but what was in your mind? Did you have doubts in your mind? Talk about that for a moment.
I knew kind of going into this that if I did have doubts in my mind, that I probably wasn't ready to start something like this. So I really didn't. I knew that I was determined. Like, I knew that if I could physically move forward, that I would. So, it was never battling thoughts about quitting. It was always kind of battling thoughts about staying just right in the moment, which I think is now looking back, I think that's the toughest part. It's hard, especially this is an out and back race. It's an out and back route. So I would be going, through sections, and I would immediately think, oh my God, I got to do this on the flip side. And then, I tried really hard to let that be the only time that I would let myself think that. So it was really, like I said, people sign up for these things for a lot of different reasons, and I have my own, and I was pretty determined that I was going to finish the thing.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah. No, it's what we always talk about is just staying in the moment and deciding what you need at that moment in order to keep going forward. So that's perfect. Nathan, you've been on this side of things as well. You talked about Tour de France earlier. What was your mindset going into something like that? I mean, that's a totally new distance for most people, if not all people. What was going through your mind? How did you prepare mentally for something like that?
So I think for me, Tour de France, just because I have quite a bit of experience with 100 milers, I can go into a 100 miler and not take it for granted, because you can never take that distance for granted, but know that I have a very good chance of both finishing and hopefully of hitting my goals. When you go into something, for me, Tour de France, for Lisa, going into this, that you don't know the outcome, that you don't know that you can do, it's a very special challenge. It's truly where you're pushing yourself to do something interesting. So the mindset on that has to be different. You can't be doing it for someone else. You can't be doing it for a silly reason. So with Tour de France, it was always just a question of how far could I push my body, and how fast could I. How can you combine going quickly with actually finishing, and how can you make sure that you're doing that? And then what happens? What are you going to do when your plan falls apart completely? Because most plans fall apart at some point in the race, and you never know when it will be. So Tour was more of a mental challenge than a physical one. Frankly, when you go 220 miles, you're going pretty slowly, and so it becomes, how can you force yourself to put one step in front of the other? And it might be a silly thing, but I know that there aren't that many people in the world that have ever finished a race like Tour de France. And for me, being able to say that I've trained and that I've challenged and will complete that, and that's what I had just heard from Lisa. She knew that she would complete the 100 miler. She just didn't know what she'd look like when she did it, and she didn't know what it would feel like throughout. But there was never a doubt in my mind that I would finish. It was just a matter of what would that look like, and how would it feel, and what would the result be. So I was, I was fortunate enough to finish it on or around my goal pace. But just like Lisa probably feels on this, now she can go back to 100 mile and improve on it and get better. And I look at different challenges, a Tour de France, a UTMBs, some of these other races that people would consider more challenging, and say, okay, now that I've set a baseline, can I set a different goal? Because now I know that I can do it, and that's no longer a goal. So now it becomes, okay, how well can I do it? How can I excel at this, or am I just trying to complete it? Because what I found is just trying to complete something the second time doesn't get you to the finish line. It will cause you to drop out. You see these professional athletes, if they're a marathon runner and they're not going to hit their Olympic time, qualifying time, they'll just quit at 13 or 20 or 9. And that's not the type of runner I want to be. I want to be the type of runner that starts something and finishes something. And so it's always reestablishing goals that are true goals, and that will carry you through. There's a funny saying at Tour: when you get done, you can basically say you are a giant. And so when you cross the finish line at Tour de France, for the last day that I was out there, it took me somewhere between 100 and 105 hours. I can't tell you exactly, but for the last day that I was out there, all I thought was, I am a giant. I just haven't proved it yet. And so then when I got done, I can say that no matter what else happens in my life, I've crossed the finish line. That's
awesome. And Lisa, we've kind of talked about mental prep. How about your physical preparations, your training? Let's touch on that there.
That to me, I always say, I think I said this the night before. I know I said it to Holly at some point. I'm like, man, I like the training a lot more than this feeling that I have right now, like before lining up. I've always loved training. I just really kind of dig those mini goals and hitting them and seeing the progression. And I worked with you, Aaron, to get myself ready for this, because I had never done this distance before, and I really had no idea what to do. I've always kind of just written my own plans for the 50Ks and for the 50 miler that I did. I just kind of went by the seat of my pants. And now looking back, I ran way too much. That's what was fascinating to me about your plan. We had a conversation at the very, very beginning about my lifestyle and, how much time could I really commit to this, and maybe, the areas where I would be running and the terrain that I'd be running on. And, I'm a mom of 3 kids, and, we have a pretty active lifestyle as a family. So your plan was super manageable. And I remember, honestly, I'm going to say this, you haven't heard this yet, but I was talking to a friend. I'm like, man, I hope I've run enough for this. Like, I don't know. It just seemed, your plan really seemed to fit for me in terms of not completely beating me up. And it worked really well. I think we were together 4 months. Was that my training plan? About 4 months.
Yep.
And it was a great mix of running, and the strength, I think, is a huge game changer. So
yeah,
it worked. I kind of doubted it, but look, it worked.
Well, as Nathan can attest, there's no textbook for training for ultra. We have principles that we can apply, as you were talking about earlier, for training for marathon. And we have, all of these people that have all of these ideas for how you should train for marathon and below. But when it comes to ultra, we're just stepping into new territory, and we're applying, principles that we've used successfully for years in the marathon, but we're trying to bring them across the ultra, which, a lot of people, they just go out and run, that's okay. It depends on your goal, obviously. But what we were trying to get you to do is be comfortable moving for a long amount of time, so we wanted to not just add mileage, but make what you do effective to get you across the finish line. So we mixed it up quite a bit and put in some things that you probably had done before, but we mixed it in a way that was going to make sense for you to go longer. So and I'm glad it worked. Was there anything that you think you would have done differently or added, or did we miss anything? This is your time to yell at me.
Honestly, no. There were times when, I was doing those twisted warrior things that you love. I'd be cursing. I'd be like, I can't even stand on this leg. How am I supposed to do this thing? But no, I think, like I said, I think it just worked. It worked really well. And I think the key thing also was that you and I would mix things up a little bit. Like if I had something going on and I couldn't do a long run on a Saturday, we'd work it in early in the week. And it was just helpful to be able to know going into it, when my longer runs were, so I could adjust for that. So no, it was all good.
All right. It's good to hear. All right, let's get into the race. I think a big thing that you both had touched on was the COVID adaptations that had to happen. Let's just start off there. What did you guys see? What did you notice?
So, the race director, like I said, he's a first-time RD, and then, throw the whole COVID thing into it. And he had to work really hard to adjust what he originally had down on paper for this event. And even, what we signed up for as runners, what we signed up for is a different event, with a lot more crew access. And you think you're going to be around kind of a bunch of people at the start, and you kind of can feed off the energy of that. But he started us out every 15 minutes in waves of 20. And then, we had to be masked up. Every time we went to an aid station, we were masked up. The aid station volunteers were masked up with gloves. We would tell them what we wanted. They had kind of a menu of things that we could choose from, typical aid station stuff, and we would tell them what we wanted, which as a runner, that was a little challenging because like Nathan mentioned before, and I'm not experienced enough to know exactly what I'm going to want, especially late in the race. I was like, I have no idea what I want. But if I, maybe had seen it laying in front of me, I'd be like, oh, that Oreo looks delicious. Let me. So that was a little bit of a challenge. But, as with races like this, you spread out so quickly anyway. there were a few times that I'd come up with another runner and we'd share, some time together, but it was, I felt safe as a runner.
Good.
Erin, she touched on one piece that it's not good or bad, but it's just so different. And I know people use aid stations to varying degrees. When I'm trying to run a race faster, I tend to not use an aid station much at all. I'll count on my own gear, my own drop bags, my own crew. But one thing that I will do is I will graze off of an aid station. I'll have my nutrition plan set up. But part of that nutrition plan is when you get to the aid station, take in 100 calories of something. And it doesn't matter what. And so that's the point where I can go over and I look over all the garbage that's sitting there and the M&Ms and the Oreos and the potato chips. And I choose something, whatever sounds best to me at the time, but it's not a thought out process. Everything else has been planned, but this is where you're adjusting based on how you feel at that moment. And that's different than you're allowed to do now. You can do it, but it takes some thought. You have to look at a menu and say, oh boy, M&Ms might be good now, or an Oreo might be good now. But it's just a different aspect of it that's an interesting thought process for the runner, especially later in a race when you've got brain fog. Things aren't working right. You don't want to read things. You don't want to ask for. You want instant gratification on that food. And so as athletes going into these 100 milers, that's one place where we're going to have to adjust, and we're going to have to say, okay. Or maybe race directors are clearer on what is at every aid station, so that when you go into the aid station, it's always been nice in the past to have a good mix of things and have different things at different aid stations. But it may be that now, in order to help out the athlete, you say these 15 things will be at every aid station. And as they're running in, they say, okay, that's what I'd like, and they can request it. So that was very different for me. The other piece is that at aid stations, even when there were crew, the crew was not able to go to the aid station. One person max at each aid station. And I think it's really important for crew to respect that. It's not the aid station's job to keep you following the rules. It's the crew's job to know the rules and to respect them. And so we tended to stay away from the aid stations. I didn't know what an aid station looked like there until I was running with Lisa, because I was respecting their ideas for it. And so Lisa would stop by the aid station, then she'd come to the crew car, and they were more flexible with allowing you to stop at crew vehicles. And I think that's another distinct difference between 12 months ago and today. The aid stations are just frankly bigger because they include the parking lot where you can go to your crew and sit down with them, as opposed to the crew coming to the aid station. So two very different experiences that Lisa went through that she would not have gone through a year ago.
And I think you can speak to this, Nathan. From what I saw, just especially in the earlier stages when I was noticing it, it seemed like everybody was being very respectful of those rules.
Yes. Yep.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
And that's just a shout out to the community doing that, knowing the rules ahead of time, reading out the just mountains of information that this race director sent out. Yeah. I think for a first time race director, we can identify a couple areas where he'll improve in the future, but the communication part was not one of those. He did a very nice job of that. And the excitement was not one of those. He was very excited, and that came through to everybody there.
That's important. Lisa, I'm interested to hear, how did you break the race up in your mind? Did you break it up by aid station, or did you break it up by distance, time? Did you break it up at all?
Of course, yes, I definitely broke it up. And going into it, I thought that I would break it up by when I would see my crew. But as I started running, I couldn't keep track of when I was going to see my crew. Like I couldn't keep track of the aid stations anymore, like the names of the aid stations anymore. And I had all these copious notes and little cheat sheets. And I was like, hand me this when I see you, because I'm going to study the elevation. And it really just became like, okay, now I can't do that. I can't devote that energy to that. I'm running to the next aid station. So then it became how far to the next aid station. That's the only thing that I would really think about in my head. And that's how I chunked it down.
Do they have the signs out at the aid stations letting you know how far to the next aid station?
Say that one more time.
So at times the aid stations will have signs that say, 6 miles to the next aid station. Did they have that out, or did you have? your cheat sheet?
I don't remember seeing a sign, but the aid station workers would always know. They'd
They would
always
know.
know.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. So let's see. How often did you get to see your crew?
I saw them at mile 26, at mile 55. So that was a big chunk.
Yeah.
And then, turning back around at 82,
Okay.
and then at 95. So,
And also at 7.
Oh, and also at 7. Yeah.
Okay. When could you pick up a pacer?
Mile 55. And then I switched out at mile 82 with Nathan.
Okay. All right. So you're going through the first section, let's say, you're running your first piece of this race. How are things going?
I thought they went well. I mean, I think the challenging thing for me going into it, I like to know what's ahead. I like to, I'm a planner. So I was a little undone by the fact that I had never been to this area of the country before. I had never seen these trails. I certainly had not run on them. I didn't know how the footing would be, all that stuff that, I didn't know was a little unnerving. So once we got going and I could see kind of what I was in for, especially in that particular section at that first aid station. Actually, when I saw them, I remember saying to my first pacer, Holly, I was like, the leaves, there are so many leaves. It's so hard to tell your footing. So that first section was really about getting to know just how like the feel of the trails. And once, I kind of settled into that, it kind of calmed me down a little bit.
What time of day did you start?
I started at 5:45 a.m.
Okay. Gotcha. So anything of note? How was your stomach? How was everything? Everything was good, Yeah.
Everything was good. I am not typically a gel eater. So I was, I obviously knew I had gone into the store and we picked out, Nathan's like, it's math. Like, this is how many calories you need to have just set. So, if all else fails, you have them there. And I remember thinking, there is no way I'm going to eat all those gels like that. There's no way. And it did get to a point where it was just the easiest thing, just to open it and get it down. And the nutrition piece of it was a job for me. I don't typically enjoy eating on my run. I know that it makes me feel better, but like the actual act of it is just, it became a job for me, which was kind of good at the beginning because it gave me something to focus on and think about. But then at the end, man, it was just rough. It was rough.
Did you do anything else to kind of take your mind off of things since you were pacerless and kind of on your own?
The course really is so cool and beautiful. It was very, it changed a lot. Right. So there were some rocky-ish parts, then there were some really flowy parts, and there was a part where it was grass. It was just the terrain, and then those stairs, stone stairs, like rail tracks I was running down. So it really was nice to try to pay attention and look around me. And then, I would come up with some runners and we'd chit chat for a while, and those conversations are always fun. The people that you get to meet that you never would have otherwise come across. I find that fascinating, and I love that part of running. So I had the opportunity to do that a couple of times, and that passed the time as well.
All right. So were you looking forward to picking up your pacer?
Yes, I was definitely looking forward to picking up.
So you picked up Holly. How did things change once you picked her up?
I think the thing that changed the most was that, you get this immediate boost, like, oh, there's somebody running with me now. And there's kind of for me, there was kind of want or need to chit chat a little bit and talk to her. And she was way more chit chatty than I was. So then I kind of went a little more quiet, and she picked up, and she did a great job of, pointing out the things that we had talked about, just reminding me to kind of be where I was. And at times I'd be like, Holly, these stairs that are coming up, they're so sucky. You just wait. I'm not lying. Like, I'm not exaggerating. They're bad. And I talked about these stairs, God, for like an hour, and we got to them. And she was like, we went down that, we had this big elaborate plan, and that kept us occupied for a while. And we started going down them, and it ended up being really not that big of a deal. And Holly was like, Lisa, are you kidding me? Like, that's what we were worried about for these past, 10 hours. But it was good to have her. And like I said, she knows we have a similar running style, I guess. And, she knows, I think, when I could run more aggressively, and when, I was wobbly or whatever, and just to kind of let me do my own thing. So it was good to have Holly around.
That's great. And Nathan, you've been on both sides of pacing and being paced. What kind of words of wisdom would you impart to everybody?
So Holly and I actually had some really nice conversations before she went out, because this was actually her first time pacing. And listening to Lisa talk about it, I think she just nailed it, because she had a general idea of what the course looked like, a general idea of where Lisa would be able to run and walk. And we did talk about that a lot. We agreed when she picked Lisa up that if it was a downhill and Lisa was looking strong, that she could probably let her run that, but not if it was too steep. If it was an uphill, okay, definitely if it's a significant uphill, absolutely force her to walk this, even if she wanted to do something else. Let's save these muscles for later. And so Holly really just absorbed all that. And in the postmortem the next day talking about it, Lisa was willing to, even though she'd seen the course before, was willing to take some of the cues from Holly. And if it was technical, then Holly would say, okay, Lisa would say, let's slow down. And Holly would say, well, you can run this because it's very flat. Even though it's somewhat technical, you can still do this. And I think that worked out quite a bit. The other nice thing that they brought was they've run together so many times that they know each other's strengths and weaknesses. And I felt like, at least in the postmortem, that Holly really felt like that was beneficial while you were running, Lisa, that she knew when you were feeling bad, and you could count on her to do that. And so it was very nice in that regard. I think the pacer's job is both to know the terrain and to know the person, and to add those two things together, and maybe take some of that, again, going back to that brain fog that comes in. In Lisa's mind, by the time I picked her up at mile 80, everything was incredibly technical. And every leaf had a rock hidden under it that was going to trip her. And every hill was just the biggest hill in history. And there was no way we were going to get to the top. And so some of the pacer's job is to know what's coming, but not make it so complicated that the runner is going to just get more confused. And so we, with Holly, I actually pre-ran the first 7 miles that Holly ran with Lisa. And so Holly and I talked through those first 7 miles and said, okay, and Lisa, I don't know if this is accurate, but the first 2 miles that Holly picked you up for, I think one, you had the opportunity to be running with someone that you enjoyed with, but also it was 2 miles of like a 2% grade downhill on beautifully groomed trails.
Yeah.
That was just heaven to run down. And so we talked about that. And so I broke that 7 miles up into 3 sections for her, and she talked through that with you. And I think that helps that she knew that going in. And so the more the pacer can know to help you out and allow you to walk and force you to maybe pick up the pace a little at that point, that's a good thing.
Another thing that I really relied on both of you guys for was, especially when I got to you, Nathan, like to tell me when I had to eat, because that was, like I said, that was on my mind the whole time by myself. And then once I picked up Holly, she'd just be like, girl, you got to eat something. It's time.
Yep. And you mentioned it a minute ago. Eating is math out there. You can take in 200 to 300 calories, and you have to take in 200 to 300 calories. It's not really an option. So it's just a matter of figuring out what form that's going to be in. Are you going to drink that? Are you going to eat that? Are you going to pick something up at the aid station? How are we going to manage that 200 to 300 calories throughout the race? And then as a pacer, my job was, okay, at what point can I just forget about that and just let her run because there's not that much left in the race. So at some point it becomes balancing that nutrition with your mental well-being and knowing when we can kind of slough off in one direction or the other.
And Lisa, did you provide any kind of guidance or expectations, like any of this that you kind of talked about prior to the race, or was this all just kind of on the spot? Like,
I think by virtue of Holly and I running together, she knew what I needed. With Nathan and I, believe it or not, had never run before. And although what I was doing at that point wasn't really running, I think, I don't know if, by talking with Holly or what, he really did know, or maybe he just knows that at that point you just kind of need to distract the runner. Like he did such a good job of taking my mind off of, at that point, the pain that I was in and how far I had to go, because even though it was only 18 miles, it might as well have been 50 at that point. Like it just seemed so unattainable. So he did a good job of really breaking it down too.
Nice. Let's talk about the crew for a moment. Nathan, as kind of the crew chief, how did you organize everybody? Did you kind of give them roles, or Lisa, did you kind of set those roles?
No, I'd say I really relied on Nathan for that. And that was clear, from the beginning when I asked him. I was like, Nathan, oh man.
But Lisa, you also did an excellent job of picking folks that had different skill sets. And it wasn't so much me saying, okay, each person's going to do this, but finding out what the people would be good at and just allowing them to do it. So, having not met Jason or Holly prior, I definitely had concerns that, could Holly even do 28 miles with her? Who knows, on a trail? Would Jason be able to divorce himself from taking care of his wife and take care of his runner? And they really just came through, and by me stepping back, Jason really ran getting her gear together at each aid station. I didn't have to worry about that. I had to worry about splits and times and how she looked and how she felt, but he had everything there, and it was great. It was, going in saying, okay, will this be a weak point? Will that be a weak point? Who knows? Maybe I was the weak point because they did such a great job that I didn't have to manage much of anything. We just found those roles and stuck with them.
And to that point, when she came in, what type of things were you looking for?
I was really just looking at her general well-being. We had set her paces and made some threats at the beginning to ensure that she didn't go out too fast. I really feel like that's the biggest mistake that everyone makes in long distance races. And again, it all comes down to math. When you say, if you're going to be comfortable with a 14-minute mile at mile 100, are you going to be comfortable with that at mile 2? And nobody's comfortable with a 14-minute mile at mile 2. So the challenge there is getting the runner to slow down. Now, Lisa was a little bit ahead of her splits, but that's expected. When you set splits out over the course of a race, it's not possible to keep them at the beginning. But she was so controlled and looked so smooth. Even coming all the way up to 55, when we saw her and Holly picked her up, she was mentally in a good enough space that we knew that we'd done our job to there. And now we could monitor it on a basis. So we really only had 3 times to check her pulse up to mile 55. And each time we'd look at the splits sheet, we'd look at her well-being, and then we'd kind of adjust a tiny bit from there. But Lisa did all the work and had listened enough that she did take those paces seriously and was really able to manage through them.
And Lisa, do you feel like you did a good job kind of maintaining your calories per hour?
Mm-hmm. I did as well as I could. I think I did. It really is so funny because towards the end, theoretically that you feel better when you eat something out there, but towards the end, when you just have nothing left and then you eat something and it's like a IV, man, it's like an immediate response. You just feel this boost. So, yeah, I think I did all right probably until I got to Nathan.
Aaron, just a pearl of wisdom that I picked up from someone at one point. They just said, listen, almost everything that can go wrong at the end of a race, if you're conditioned well, has to do with nutrition. So if you're tired, eat something. If you trip, eat something. If your legs hurt, eat something. And we're all undernourished by definition at the end of a race. And so just maintaining that schedule and making sure that you're eating something is so hard, but so important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anything else that you saw up to mile 55? Was there anything, Lisa, that you think you would have changed or done differently?
I would have probably not to mile 55. I think that was all right. I can't think of anything that I would have changed.
Sure. It sounds like something might have happened right or after that. Was there something that went on?
Once it got dark, I had some hesitation around the whole headlamp thing and running until the battery died. Like that was a mind game for me a little bit at the beginning. Luckily, Nathan had this Mac Daddy headlamp that he let me use that he was like, I must have asked him like 10 times, the battery's not going to die, right? Like the battery's not going to die on me, right? How long can I run with this battery? So once I was secure with that, once it got dark, obviously it gets colder. And I wish that I would have put hand warmers in every single pocket that I had so I could take new ones out. Cause I did start to get a little cold after I picked up Holly.
Fair enough. So Nathan, we have to ask this Mac Daddy headlamp. What did you have?
I use a Petzl now.
Okay.
The NAO, it's 750 lumens. It's more than bright enough. It'll light up a canyon for you. And I know that short of putting a belt on, it's as much light as you're going to get. And I think people go back and forth on whether they want to use a belt or a headlamp, but I do like to be able to see where my eyes are pointing. So I always have a headlamp on. Sometimes on really technical trails, I'll subsidize that with something around my waist just to help my footsteps. But I think if you're going to choose one of those, the headlamp provides a little bit more efficacy.
I always, when I don't use a belt, I say, dang it, I could use the belt. So nowadays I just always have the belt and the headlamp. I use both. Especially in the fall, given concerns with leaves and rocks and roots underneath. So I always, recommend use the belt and the headlamp. But like you said, some people choose just one or the other, but I like having both. Okay, we've gotten through the first half. Well, first 55. So you're through there, and you had picked up Holly. Sounds like things were going well with Holly. Holly took you to what mile?
Holly took me to 82.
82.
And I will say that things started to go a little south. We had an aid station, I think, at mile 74. And after that, it kind of got rough for me. We were on a trail that just seemed to go on forever. And I must have asked how long are we on this trail, Holly? Like how long? And at one point she said, we only have like a quarter of a mile. And this girl took notes. Like she knew those trails better than anybody, but it was not a quarter of a mile. And I remember being like, this is longer than a quarter of a mile. After, 74, the kind of things that were just maybe uncomfortable started to hurt a little bit more. It started to get tough to get the calories in, not because I felt sick, just because I was just tired of doing it. So then, we ran through that patch and she got me to Nathan at 82.
What time of day was it when you got to 82?
3:11 a.m. because I remember looking at the clock and I was like, is that the time? Is it 3:00 in the morning? Everyone's like, yeah. I was like, oh, that's so weird. I became so used to just thinking about, running to the next aid station. I just decided early on that I was not going to worry about what time of day it was because it didn't matter what time of day it was or night. It just mattered that I had to get to the next section. So, yeah, picked up Nathan at 3:00 in the morning.
And recognizing that it's 3:00 in the morning, how are you holding up?
got cold. I was cold. I did not want to get out of the heated Jeep. I changed all my clothes or as many articles of clothing as I could. But I knew, like, this is it. Once I picked up Nathan in my head, I was like, okay, this is the last stretch. It's the last chunk. And I was eager to get out there. And also, I knew by the way I was physically feeling that I probably wasn't going to start feeling better. So I was a little bit nervous to feel how much more it was going to get uncomfortable.
Were you doing caffeine at this point?
I did not do any caffeine, believe it or not,
No.
except once when Nathan tricked me. But I was a little afraid of what that might do to my stomach at that point, and I didn't feel sleepy. Like I didn't feel like I needed to pull over and take a nap or anything. So I just started, decided to roll with it.
Cool. Very cool. So Nathan, you pick her up. What were you trying to do to keep her moving towards that finish?
Sure. Well, actually, she for mile 82 for her first 100 mile looked great, and I'm a big believer. We touched a little bit on Lisa's cards when she started, and the amount of detail she was putting onto her pace cards as she went was just astonishing to me. It was take a left at this road, go up for a quarter mile, do this. And so in the last 18 miles, in my mind, it was just very simple. We had a flat stretch, then we had a long climb, and then we descended into an aid station, the second aid station, and then we went up and down again. That's it. That's all I needed to know. And so I knew that if we were going to run at all, it would be in that flat section at the beginning. And Lisa was a champ when she rolled out of mile 82. We ran the next 4 or 5 miles pretty much straight. And she just did a great job. I don't know what she looked like before that, but we do long stretches of a quarter mile, a half mile or more, and then we'd take a quick walk break, and then she'd jump back in. And so we got into an aid station that was pretty cold, and they had some fires going. And when we walked out of that aid station, it was uphill for 9 miles. It was a big one, and so we did a lot more walking there. But when we got to the top of that, then we were able to say, okay, now there's just a short downhill, a little up, and then we're home. And so it was trying to make it as simple as possible and things that made sense to me, but also made sense to Lisa so that she wasn't overthinking things. So I don't know when the right time to address it is, Lisa. You mentioned mile 74. And I'm just curious if there was anything that happened at mile 74, anything that mentally made you change your mind there. You said that's when it started to get difficult.
I feel like this is a trick question because I don't remember anything glaring.
So interesting, and this goes back to what we were saying before about having backup goals and real secondary goals. What I hear rumor Lisa did at mile 74 was for the first time was able to do math on her watch that told her she was not going to make her primary goal. And in my mind, there's very little that can ruin your ability to push than knowing that you're not going to make a real goal. And if you don't have a backup, then it becomes very difficult to move forward. So in my mind, that was a big turning point where it just becomes harder to run. You can still do it, but if you're not going to hit that goal. And at the time, I don't think she had a real backup there. When I picked her up, she was just afraid she was going to get cut off. And that had a little bit to do with the start, with the 20-person starts. Lisa was in a very early group. And so the entire day, the faster people that were in the back groups were catching up, and it seemed like she was going slower than she was. So her watch actually died at mile 82. And we made a conscious decision not to charge it because I had a watch and I knew how long it would take us to get in. So for the next 10 miles anyways, maybe 16 miles, Lisa was afraid she was going to get cut off. And so my job was to convince her that that was not the case, that we could still hit her secondary goal. And when she, until she decided that secondary goal was worth hitting, it was a very, very difficult run for her. And so, as we started to get close to the finish, that secondary goal became much more solidified in her mind and something that she really wanted to hit. And then I saw it turn around and she was able to really push herself in a way that she hadn't been able to earlier.
But Nathan, tell the audience why I was able to do that.
Can I
hear your perspective, and then I'm going to tell you what my perspective is. Or tell you my perspective first.
So this kind of gets to the end, though, and I think maybe you should tell the story of getting to the end, and then I can fill in some gaps on it, because this is your story, not a timing story.
So there, yes, you are absolutely 100% right. I kind of have blocked that from my mind. Yes, when I told Holly, like, there's no way, like, it's done. My primary goal was 24 hours, and that was hard to realize that there was just no way. And I still felt like I had so much further to go. I was just like, crap, how many, like, you promise that I am not the last runner out here? Do you promise that there, like, am I going to be chasing these aid stations? Because in my head at that time, that's where I went. Like, I didn't meet my A goal, so I better at least meet that very last goal. I hope they don't have to pull me off the course. So then at some point, and I can't remember, Nathan, at what point it was, something kind of clicked in me. And I was like, my B goal was under 30 hours. And then I was like, oh my God, could I get something with it? I remember saying, Nathan, is there any way I can finish and have the first number be a 2? And he said, I think he said something like, yeah, but we need to do an average of 15-minute miles from here on out. And then boom, it was on. I'm like, all right, let's do it. Let's go. And the whole time he really kind of made it like I was chasing that goal by seconds. Like,
can I give some color here, Lisa?
What?
Can I give some color here in that when you decided to let me know that 30 hour was still a target for you, there were only 3 miles left in the race. And you'd ignored that for the last 15 miles. And so when you said that to me, I looked down at my watch. Now, one of the nuances is that because of the staggered start, Lisa started at 5:45 a.m., not on an hour, which is a really weird, as a pacer, when you're trying to do racing math, is a really weird thing to try and figure out. And so Lisa said, is there any way I can get in? And my only goal had been to get her in under 30 hours when I picked her up. That was my conscious goal. And I knew that we were going to hit that. Lisa was convinced that we were way off of that, but I knew we would hit 30 hours. In order to get swept off the course, Lisa would have had to take a nap, honestly. So she was doing so well, but she'd given up on it a little bit, and was just worried. And so when she gave me a goal, I looked at my watch and it happened to be on the hour. And I said, well, Lisa, if we want to get in by quarter of, we're going to have to do 15-minute miles the rest of this. And she said, can I do that? I said, I'm fully confident you can do it. I'm 100% believe you can get in. And she said, so if we get in, we'll be under 30 hours. And I said, absolutely. And so we spent the next 3 miles. She pushed as hard as she could push. And she had some, she had very physical challenges with pushing that hard. And so it was amazing to see her run. But she pushed as hard as she could push. I knew about half a mile out that we would not make that quarter of. She was a little concerned about that. I was not, because I hadn't mentioned to her that we actually had 2 more hours to go before the 30-hour cutoff. And so as we came in, she looked down and for about 10 seconds was discouraged because we'd missed that quarter of. And then she saw the first number on the finish. She said, is that 29 hours? And I looked at her and said, actually, it's 28. So you're in good shape. She did amazingly well pushing. So I did not lie to her, but I gave her a new challenge that had her push a little harder than she would have pushed, because I felt like that was important at the end of the race. I didn't want her to leave anything on the course, because when you're running, it's easy to leave something out there. And immediately when you get done, you regret it. And I know that she didn't leave a single thing on the course. And so regardless of anything else that I did out there, a small white lie to get her to do what she was capable of doing was wonderful.
It worked out. I forgive you.
Now that you can walk again.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Lisa, to you, how did those last 3 miles feel, just pushing and having that number in your mind, not knowing?
It was horrible. It felt horrible. It did. It was a little stressful for me. But as Nathan said, there's a 0% chance that I would probably have run at all, because I just didn't think I had it in me. So yeah, I'm looking back. I am glad that he did what he did. But at the time, it was stressful.
Do you have a new perspective on what you think you can do?
I have a new perspective for how much really probably anybody can do. You hear it all the time that your mind is so much stronger than your body. And that's something that's, I think, hard for people to wrap their heads around. And unless you go through something like that and then truly believe it, I think I truly believe that now.
Excellent. That's awesome. So, all right, you're approaching the finish here. So talk about that. How did that feel?
Honestly, I don't know. I think that I thought I'd be more emotional, but I was so glad to just sit down. I was just so tired. And so it was just like unbelievable to me that I finished it. And then you cross the line and, you see your family, and the race director was there handing everybody their buckle, which is a big deal. And Holly Holly just said, "You're done." Like, I think maybe I kind of might have looked like crap. Do I have to run more or something? Like she just kind of just said, "You're done." And that, it was a cool feeling. It was a good feeling.
Nice. Nathan, what did that feel like to you?
I was just so excited for Lisa to see that win, and to know how she'd felt for at least the last 30 or 40 miles, to get a finish there. And in my mind, again, to have her just leave everything that she had out there, work so hard to get this amazing achievement. And it makes a huge difference to have seen that in her eyes when she finished it. She didn't look as terrible as she thinks she looked. She looked like someone that had just run 100 miles and had just accomplished something she was not 100% sure she'd be able to do.
It's an amazing experience, especially when you've done it before on your own, to share that with somebody. So that's awesome that you two got to share that moment. Aside from learning that you can kind of push beyond boundaries you thought you couldn't, what else did you take away from this, Lisa?
I just think it's important. People always have reasons not to start big goals. And there's never really a right time to start a big goal like this, or something that seems daunting, and not just running. Of course, we're talking about running right now, but this, to me, like looking back on the whole process, just exemplifies that when you have something that you've been wanting to do, you just have to start. It sounds oversimplified, but as soon as you make the decision and start, everything else just kind of falls into place.
Right on. Nathan, any takeaways from you?
I loved seeing the team that she assembled come together and just kind of be there for her. And as a crew member, it's so, frankly, I don't get to crew that often. One, because I'm racing and working, and two, because honestly, Lisa's the first person that's asked me. And so it was so nice. It was so nice to be on that side and not have to worry about myself, but look and say, what can we do for someone else? And, she had a crew where no person out there, despite the fact that Jason was getting up at 2 a.m. to drive me to switch out with her other pacer, the fact that her kids were out there. No one at that moment felt like they were the most important cog in the wheel. The most important cog was Lisa moving along and making sure that we didn't get in the way of her doing it. And to not only do that, but to get her what she needed was wonderful.
That's tremendous. Do we miss anything? Any stories or tidbits that we missed?
I just want to say, I always feel like if you can keep going in a race, keep going. There's no matter how fast you are, unless you're maybe an Olympic world record holder or something along those lines, the person that cares about it most is you. And there really aren't, while you're out there, if your driver is, Lisa has this wonderful program in Charlotte, Run Charlotte Run. And she's an inspiration for a lot of people. But if her reason for going out there was because of those other people, I doubt she would have finished. This was for her so that she could add something to other people. And so doing it for, being able to deliver on that and doing it for yourself is a really big deal. And so I just love to see that to have Lisa be in a spot now where she's achieved that, and hope that other people can find that as well for themselves.
Excellent. Awesome. If people want to reach out, are you comfortable sharing a way they can find you, either on social media or another avenue?
Yeah, so I do manage Run Charlotte Run. It's Run CLT Run on all social media platforms. And then there's a website too. That's runcltrun.com.
And Nathan?
And I do all the social media for the Ultra Running Company, and so spend almost no time on my own. So the best way to get a hold of me is if you go onto any social media and look up the Ultra Running Company, I'm likely the person that will answer. We're just a running store in Charlotte, and out trying to support the community and have some fun for ourselves. So my email is super easy. It's just nathan@ultrarunningcompany.com. We're Ultra Running Company on Facebook, and we're searchable everywhere else. So we would love to help anybody out. It's just fun to be doing things like this.
Thank you both for all you do for the community. I think we should probably wrap up by, Lisa, what was your final finish time and all that good stuff?
It was 28:07.
28:07. It was beautiful. First 100 miler in the books, one buckle down, and God knows how many more to come. I thank you both for your time and sharing your stories, for all your words of wisdom. It was tremendous seeing both of you, and I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate the invitation, Aaron. Thank you so much, and great job, Lisa. Really proud of you.
Well, I'd like to always thank my guests, Lisa and Nathan, for their time and their experience. Once again, huge congratulations to Lisa on finishing her first 100. It was a great story to hear, and obviously Lisa had her ups and downs, and she battled through and got her finish. So tremendous job to her. Nathan, thank you for helping her get through it, not only in crewing and sharing your knowledge with her, but also in pacing. Tremendous to both of you. Thank you so much. So far as things that go on here, my newsletter just came out. This episode will release on November 19th. My November newsletter just came out on the 17th. So if you haven't seen it, it is posted on my website, Runningpains. If you go to the Connect page, you'll see there's a link for the newsletter, and all of my newsletters are archived there. You can subscribe also on the website. All of these podcasts are also hosted, and archived on the website, so you can go back and listen to previous episodes. This past newsletter, I get real. Wow, I think it took me so long just because I had so much stuff that I wanted to share. It was, there's a lot in there, a lot of things that I went through, and wrote articles about, not only in training and racing, nutrition, there's lots of stuff packed in there. So, I hope you'll take a look, subscribe. I shared it on my, MR Runningpains Coaching Facebook page. So if you like it, you feel it's worthwhile, and you want to share it, I certainly appreciate that, as I do you sharing this podcast. I hope that you take stuff away from it and think it worthwhile to share with others. That was the goal of my podcast, was to create episodes that we could all learn and take something away from, as well as communicate with others, especially in this time. It feels like we need to draw nearer in some way, and though we can't do it physically, at least we can do it verbally and communicate with one another. So if you've got something that you think would be worthwhile coming onto the podcast, even if you want to be one of my guests, don't hesitate to reach out. You can reach me through Facebook, MR Runningpains Coaching, my personal Facebook page, Aaron Saft, Instagram, MR Runningpains, my Strava, Aaron Saft, MR Runningpains, YouTube. I shared a video in my newsletter of the Lydiard Hill drills. I've been doing those, going on week 3 here and into week 4. So I've really got some good experience. I probably should redo the video, because it's amazing how much my form has changed and how much better I feel. So if you have questions about that stuff, training, I talk about base training in the newsletter as well. So reach out if you want to hear my thoughts or learn about my coaching. I've got a few spots open. My newsletter, I put that I have 5 spots left. I know my maximum of what I'm comfortable with, and looks like I have 5 spots available right now. So interested in reaching out, please do. Coaching has been, as I say in every episode, a true joy. I'm really, really thankful for the opportunity. I keep learning. I took another course this past weekend, and so I'm also working on another certification on top of that, and a third one to come soon. So I just want to keep learning and keep doing better for my athletes. I want to grow my knowledge of this sport and how to better serve the athletes. It's interesting to train the world of ultra, because there is no textbook, and no runner is the same. They don't respond to training the same. So it's kind of a cool puzzle to figure out. So if this jives with you and what you're thinking, like I said, please reach out. My next episode next week, we've got Thanksgiving, and I've got a lot to be thankful for. One being my family. They are my rock, my ground rod, if you will. I really am most grateful for them, and I hope to have them on for the podcast, and we'll talk things, running, life, etc. My little guy, Keegan, not so little anymore. He's 13. He just ran his first cross country race, and it broke my heart that we weren't allowed to be there and spectate, but. We're going to talk to him about it. Kind of my daughter's perception of running has changed a little bit, so it's it's cool to watch them grow and develop and let them become who they are. So we're going to talk. If I can convince my wife to come on, hopefully we'll have the 4 of us on, and all 4 of us can kind of chat and talk about where things are and where they're going, and But anyhow. Other than that, I have a race this weekend. Racing the Duncan Ridge Trail 50K down in Georgia. We start in Vogel Park, which is the start for Georgia Death Race and the Cruel Jewel 100. So heading down there and going to run a 50K. And just going to have fun, that's what it's all about right now. Really enjoy where my fitness is, so I'm going to go out there and just have a great time, and hopefully meet some cool folks, and get a 50K under my belt before the end of the year. So, what else? I think that's all I got for this episode. Again, questions, comments, concerns, don't hesitate to reach out. And please, as I said, share this podcast. I appreciate the support. I appreciate all of you. I appreciate your listening. And until next time, this is Aaron Saft signing episode 40 off with I hope all is well. And I'll talk to you next Thursday on Thanksgiving Day. All right, everybody. Take care.